Hello, so the time is 9 minutes past midnight, and I just finished watching the first episode of Star Trek Picard. So, this is Sir Patrick Stewart's return to the Star Trek franchise after Star Trek Nemesis, which was 2002. So, his first appearance in the role in 18 years. Um, And yeah, so it's also a second of, I guess, the postmodern Star Trek, modern Star Trek, after Discovery. Um, so yeah, uh, I guess from the top, I enjoyed it. I thought, thing is, here's the thing about reviving a show, bringing a show back after, um, as, but especially now, this era, because you know, it was kind of different with Doctor Who. A lot of people who watched Doctor Who when it came back in 2005 weren't that knowledgeable or weren't big fans of the classic series. I wasn't. My first exposure, this is a bit of a tangent, my first exposure to Doctor Who, I think, was brief glimpses of the Peter Cushing films, like brief scenes, mainly with Daleks exterminating the Thals. Then I read a bunch of Eighth Doctor adventure novels. Um, and then it came back on TV in 2005. I mean, I'm obviously aware, as you have to be if you're British, of Doctor Who and its kind of impact on sci-fi. But apart from it being uh, the story of a time traveler, not many people actually knew what Doctor Who really was. And so when it came back, people who, modern TV audiences, that was all they had to expect. I guess it's kind of reverses the same. So if you're someone like me who grew up primarily on post 2005 Doctor Who, as much as I do consider myself a fan of the classic series as well, and don't get me wrong, I love the classic series, some brilliant Doctor Who classic series episodes. I grew up in modern television, so I watch things like 1963 Doctor Who or 1970s Doctor Who, and I can notice the difference in kind of pacing and writing, and that's the same across all TV. You watch TV how it's produced today, and you watch TV how it's produced in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and you can tell not just from the quality, not just from the different aspect ratio. You can tell it's a different brand of TV, and the same kind of goes for Star Trek. I mean, wait, Star Trek's more accessible. I don't know. I can't really put my finger on why. Maybe it's the episodic nature. Maybe it's because it lasted well until the early 2000s, late 90s. That being said, actually, the original series of Star Trek and Star Trek: The Next Generation have very marked different tones and genres. In the same way that the Next Generation era of Star Trek has very different tones to the current era of Star Trek. There are obvious jumps. Um, I'm hang me now, but I enjoy the original series Star Trek for its cheesiness, and I appreciate the impact it had on progressive media and as and breaking those boundaries. But I never really, if you give me a choice between watching, say, Deep Space Nine or the Next Generation or the original series, I'd always go for the latter, even though the original series is OG Star Trek, because it just never the cheesiness and the tone. I could appreciate it, and I could appreciate the impact it had at the time, but I recognize it not as current TV. And sorry, media evolves and the audience evolves. There's nothing wrong with that. We haven't gotten worse or different, more or less. I mean, some criticisms I can point to laziness, like I think the mass production of certain types of media. That's mostly children's TV because people think they can get away with rushing children's TV or what they see as children content. Less so on blockbuster or mainstream level, unless it's something that's purely eye candy like Transformers. But at least Transformers is trying to be eye candy. It's not going to be ashamed about that. I realize I'm going on different tangents here, but I think if we're going to discuss Star Trek Picard, we're going to discuss the fan reaction, and that's really what most people actually care about. We have to understand TV as a whole concept. Hello, welcome to my channel where I have very much thoughts that go all over the place, rather than any constructive criticism of the actual media I'm talking about as a whole. But yeah, no. So yeah, somehow I think Star Trek, Next Generation era Star Trek maybe the episodic nature, maybe the timeless nature, maybe just progressive forward thinking of the people who wrote it still resonates strongly today. So because of that, a lot of people, whilst when Doctor Who came back, a lot of the audience who would have then engaged on post 2005 Doctor Who weren't necessarily classic Whovians. A lot of people who are now going to engage with Star Trek Picard, in fact, pretty much everyone who's going to engage with Star Trek Picard, because it's very much Star Trek made for people who are Star Trek fans. It's not a show you can easily market to people who have never seen Star Trek before. I don't think they're really trying to. Unlike Star Trek Next Generation, where you could, if you haven't seen Star Trek before, or if you haven't seen Star Trek Next Generation before, you could probably jump in mid-series and not really lose anything because it's very episodic. That's another thing. TV has advanced and moved away from episodic content because audiences are more. It's easier now for audiences to engage in long-form narratives such as the series, and now we kind of. I just ripped my underwear. Now we kind of expect long narratives, and it's hard to get away with episodic stuff. And now episodic content is seen more as anthologies or for themes of children rather than actual adult mainstream media. And that's just another way TV's advanced. So even with Doctor Who, which used to be completely episodic, even when it was serialized, it was episodic serialized in a serialized form. Now if Doctor Who doesn't have a coherent story arc across a series, you'll be like, well, what's going on? There's just nothing's really impacts happening. And that's kind of a bit, because the original Next Generation was very episodic, it makes it very accessible, even, and again, for progressive writing makes it very modern, even though it was made 20, 30 so years ago. Jesus, actually, it's 2020, so about 35 years ago. A lot of people, even if they weren't alive then, would still probably have grown up watching it, or if their parents were fans, they would have definitely grown up watching it. It's not, if you're either into it or you're not, but if you're into it, you've got to do it, or you're into it. And even when later Star Trek moved more, even people who made Star Trek kind of realized that how TV was evolving, because later Star Trek, like, Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, had periods where it was more or less serialized, had kind of yelled at me, but I realised that my microphone is that tuned to my voice that's actually not going to pick him up, which is a bit of a shame. Oh well. Like the last season of Deep Space Nine was realised ended with the Dominion War. There was a whole series of season of Enterprise, which was about the Vance and threat from the Xindi. And then, so people are very used to that kind of Star Trek, that kind of method of storytelling, message of the week kind of thing. So you can watch Star Trek and you expect some sort of message to be told. So now we move to Star Trek Discovery, ignoring the films, because the films have always also been their own kind of thing. Tonally, the films are quite different from the show. Some films, it's very unclear what the actual message is meant to be. It's just a very action sci-fi film. Even Next Generation series films. And you have Abrams' series of films, or the films that Abrams started. Actually, I like the films except for Into Darkness, which was a very lazy rehash of Wrath of Khan, and it just annoyed me how much they didn't really seem to care about the fans for that. But then I actually love Star Trek Beyond, and I think it's one of my favorite Star Trek films, actually. Then you move to Star Trek Discovery, which is very much a long form narrative. Some of them actually also had episodic content, but it was mostly about the Spore Drive and story arc and stuff, and it had kind of different arcs in it. And it's pretty obvious a lot of people don't like Star Trek Discovery for some reason. It's unclear how much of that is legit criticism and how much of that is marred by just, I want all Star Trek back. And that's a problem, because now we've given fans so much of a voice, we're trusting anyone who has access to a YouTube channel, ignore me, everyone who has access to a YouTube channel, everyone who has access to Twitter, everyone who has access to social media, giving their thoughts on content without really understanding or being able to guess how much of an insight they have. Like, I'm going to put my own horn here. I'm pretty confident I have a good insight into how general fiction works. I make films and I write. I might not be, I might not be an award-winning writer. I might not have any kind of really any credits worth any salt to my name, but I do spend a lot of my time as at least as a hobby, if not profession, reading about scripts and script writing and storytelling. So I think I have a good grasp of the general building blocks of it, and I, but I don't take for granted that everyone has that same knowledge. People just watch fiction just to watch fiction without really understanding the kind of creative process behind it. And sometimes not knowing the meat that goes in the sausages makes the sausages better. But sometimes if you do know the building blocks behind a piece of art form, you can actually understand more of the messages that are being told because you understand what the author is trying to tell. That's why we teach things like English in school. So then when you appreciate literature, you understand the interpretations between different author intents. So where does leave us with Star Trek Picard? Well, I'm going to appreciate it as Star Trek for a modern audience because that's what it's meant to be. It's produced in 2020. Oh well, it's being released in 2020. I just had nice. And so I can appreciate a long burn narrative rather than episode where everything's gonna be answered. And shows like this set up questions because Star Trek Picard is clearly a show of intrigue. It's meant to draw us into a mystery, and then was meant to delve into that mystery. So it's more like a quest, if anything. Set up the plot hooks. We're curious. We don't know what any of this really means, but set up enough. I mean, we've learned a couple of things. But I think Patrick Stewart is obviously fantastic. A lot of the other supporting cast were really good. It's allowing us to see a Star Trek world. I think if I get why some people complain about Star Trek Discovery because it seemed to really break a lot of the world. To an extent, I agree. Not entirely, but to an extent, I agree. It kind of fixed it later on. I don't know, and it's unclear whether or not this was always the intent or if it was response to the fans. If it was response to the fans, that's response to the fans done correctly. That's unlike a cough cough with Rise of Skywalker, which was response to fans done wrong. This is the second live video I've done in 2 days where I've kind of Rise of the Skywalker as an example, but it's an example. So yeah, okay. So in terms of the actual, I find it very easy to digest, and to me, it seemed more Star Trek even Star Trek Discovery. Not that Star Trek Discovery isn't Star Trek, because I'm a big fan of Star Trek Discovery. I love characters, and I think it's very good. I think Star Trek Discovery is good Star Trek, but it's very different from old Star Trek, because old Star Trek used to, you look through the protagonist's eyes as they looked at other alien cultures, and those other alien cultures on a meta level are meant to represent aspects of humanity. So we're reflecting on ourselves by looking at metaphorical representations of ourselves. Star Trek Discovery is more on the nose. It's humans looking back on actual humans in the narrative and on a meta level. And I think that's kind of the more oblique form of kind of self-analysis that we need. So that's why I think Star Trek Discovery worked. And Star Trek Picard seems more spin-offy than the other spin-offs of Star Trek because it's not really exploring. We haven't even gone into space yet. Not anything. It's not a flashback or well, I guess we went to the Romulan place, but like it's clearly more of an intrigue drama set in a Star Trek universe, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Maybe it's time Star Trek expands its genres and actually delves into other things. It's got a clear, rich history universe to explore of different things, and why shouldn't it have the same right that Star Wars does in exploring different aspects of its universe with different forms of media. So currently I'm reading this as a drama intrigue, and it fits that very well. And Sir Patrick Stewart is a fantastic person to really lead that as a more aged Jean-Luc Picard. We get a lot of kind of development in terms of the history. So we know during the Romulan supernova incident. And I really hope this doesn't conflict anything with Star Trek Online, because up to this point I considered everything Star Trek Online to be canon. Because it was the only post-Nemesis Star Trek we had. But it was written by the same writers, and it seemed to actually type a lot of the plot holes, not really plot holes, of Star Trek the 2009 Star Trek film, in that whilst everyone called it supernova, it was an artificial supernova, so it acted very differently, which is what caused a lot of people to be surprised. It seems so far to have kind of not conflicted with anything I can remember. Although problem drawing plot from a MMORPGs that if you don't, after months of not playing a Magatoy, you kind of forget a lot of plot, and it's not a very linear game, so you kind of get lost. But for me, it's a rapid guide. Is my point here. Anyway, so he tried to lead the evacuation attempt of Romulus. For some reason, people were against this, which I guess is a necessary analogy because it's meant to be kind of highlighting our current. Star Trek is always meant to be reflective of the current time it was made in. It makes it's back in the 70s and the 60s, a utopia gave people something people to strive for because that's what people at that time needed, an ideal to strive for. At this time, we are too dystopian, too cynical to really look at utopian futures and want to strive for it because we, as I said, are dystopian and cynical. So at this point, what we need is a Star Trek which unfortunately is slightly dystopian. Because it's basically, instead of being like, here's the ideal, go for it, it is, here's what you look like right now, slap yourself out of it. And I guess that's what Discovery is doing, that's what Picard is doing. So, yes, there's obviously the part about, should Starfleet have dedicated enemy resources, as it did towards rescuing Romulans, even though they're not Federation citizens, and obviously Picard's like, a life is a life. Which again, this is probably the strongest parallels to real life politics in the episode. And so we learned that he was responsible for the I lost it kind of here. Whilst he was doing that, for some reason that made somewhere more vulnerable to synthetics, and they rebelled for some reason, and it caused catastrophic disaster. I guess that's interesting, and I hope we explore more of it because it was thrown out there very suddenly. What is essentially quite curveball, because ever since we saw Data, synthetics as a thing have been a very weird topic explored by Star Trek. They seem to take for granted without really covering the bigger aspects of it. Like we've sometimes seen sapient holograms, and that's tackled but then forgotten about. And you got to consider how this ramification works across the board. Same with Data. I mean, it's always established that Data was always an exception to really, as an artificial intelligence, Data was always kind of the exception rather than anything else. So after that, they banned synthetics, which has kind of a dark kind of. I hope it tied back to Measure of a Man, because we're really going back to whether or not synthetic life forms are real life forms, and at some point we need to revisit Measure of the Man because we've actually banned them, which is and I think we will because Bruce Maddox was name dropped, which was a connection. And I love the connections to the old series that I wasn't actually expecting, because I felt they were going to try and make it more accessible to viewers, but actually realizing you knowing a lot about the old, about the next generation, including things like Man, where data is trying to. It was a trial to see if Data had rights or not, essentially. I think hopefully we are, and I think we're gonna. Yeah, but it's interesting because it kind of. I always thought with people like beings like Data, Data is immensely OP. Like he could and has run the entire Enterprise on by himself. He's the strongest of all the crew. He's objectively the smartest of all the crew. He has photographic memory. He has the best combat skills. He will never really need to forget anything. He was really OP, and there was times, but he was also very vulnerable in that he was very easy to hack. He had the worst security ever, and a lot of there were so many episodes where a vulnerability in Data meant that it caused issues for the crew. Right? They had to either he let something in by him, or he went rogue and they had to figure out how to stop him. And that, to me, it's like this happens so many times. And in real life, if someone was this vulnerable to a ship or objects as powerful as the USS Enterprise, things would change, measures were put in place, and yet he was the second in command of the ship. No, sorry, the third in command, the second officer, third in command of the ship. So I was always wondering, what always surprised me that at no point was it ever really mentioned how much of a risk Data was. and I think this is actually a build on that. And it's good to see it because it's thrown very bluntly in our faces without any kind of build up towards it. Having to see what it shows, see if it's actually done properly. Um, so yeah, I need to maybe go back and watch that scene to work out exactly what the connection is between Picard's involvement in Romulus and Fedix Rebellion. But because of that, they stopped helping Romulans, and then Picard finally resigned from Starfleet as a captain or admiral in protest. And yeah, then 14 years later, where we're at, where he's just enjoying life. He's plagued by these dreams, and then someone who he eventually becomes to believe is Data's daughter. Although I think it's then revealed that Maddox created her using Data's essence, and I guess that's not watch back because I don't know if it explained it or it's going to explain it, but exactly how or why Data's essence was recoverable. I do have to wonder about B4. Is it implied that he got shut down because he wasn't able to really incorporate Data's essence that he tried to transmit towards him, or was he shut down because of the ban? Because that's kind of the dark ramification. They essentially say androids have rights, but we're not going to execute all the androids because they're a risk. But yeah, that was a thing that happened. The person that Picard says he was going to protect gets killed, and we know she has a twin, so we're going to explore. I guess the twin is who we're going to explore further on. Yeah, it set up a lot of things, and I think it paced it quite well. People complain about pacing, I think, is what I've seen. I've not looked at the reviews because I've not seen it yet, and I don't tend to watch reviews. But you read reviews until I've seen it, something. But I think people are complaining about the pacing of the plot. I think the pacing was fine. I know there's going to be another episode. I'm going to watch it, and there's going to be more pacing there. Things are allowed to have a slow burn. It's not as if it was pacing where it's pacing. If you don't resolve a story, your pacing needs to leave you at a point where you're wondering what happens next. Bad pacing is when nothing happens. Say, for example, Orphan 55 is a recent example in Doctor 2 where absolutely nothing of really any plot consequences thing kind of happen. The extreme kind of side is the last episode of Doctor 2, which I yesterday, where everything happened. This is fine. This is the same pacing I expect from an intrigue drama show, which is, I guess, is the approach you need to go into watching it. It's intrigue drama. It's mystery intrigue drama, and that has a slow burn. Things that can reveal to you in real time, because you will discover it and figure it out in real time. Yeah, the plot isn't anything extraordinary, but I think it matched kind of expectations. That was nice. It was nice. I enjoyed it, and it didn't really it met my expectations of what I expected from the show. And having expectations because this wasn't really like, because it's a spin-off. All I wanted to do was really succeed, but I didn't really have any preconceptions about why I was going to go. In terms of the show's direction, like I expected Star Trek Discovery to be mainstream Star Trek, doing the same of the old. Maybe that was my own fault and kind of contrary to what I was saying earlier. I wasn't expecting this to do the same thing, so I guess I was able to enjoy it without expectations, which I guess kind of just meets the whole thing where you shouldn't really go into watching things. Yeah, that's my first Picard. I'm gonna definitely watch the rest of the series, so let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys whenever I watch something else. Anything else, I guess. Well, maybe not anything else. Anyway, bye.